right, for those of you that are just joining, I'm Isaiah Drummond. I'm a senior here at Stanford studying mechanical engineering. And right now we have Professor Charles Lee, who teaches in the Graduate School of Business with us as part of our senior week with Veritas. So just to start off, Charles, I think it'd be amazing if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself for those of the people that don't know you.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for the opportunity to spend a little time with you. My name is Charles Lee. I'm a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. So going all the way back, I'm in first generation Asian Americans, Asian Canadian, I guess. I was born in Taiwan and at 9 years old, immigrated with my family to Canada. So I grew up in Southern Ontario. I went to undergrad at University of Waterloo, studied mathematics and accounting, and then went into a career in which I got my PhD at Cornell University in New York, and then a career that spanned actually 30 years ago is when I got my PhD. So it's been 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I've taught at University of Michigan, Cornell University, and then I spent 5 years in industry. So I was an asset manager at a large quantitative fund. It's related to my research on mass psychology and stock markets. And then I missed the campus, so I came back to teach. So that was 2009. I became a full-time faculty at Stanford, and so I've been there 11 years.
Oh, amazing. And so we'll get into your career and industry in a little bit, but just for those of the people that are at Stanford that may be interested, you've won a ton of awards, some directly voted by students. And so it's pretty obvious that you love what you're doing. And can you tell us about what you're actually teaching now at Stanford and what you find most meaningful about it?
Okay, yeah. And so I do love my job. I love the teaching. The course that I teach is I don't get to teach undergrads very often. I teach a class called Alphanomics, which is an investment class. Alpha is kind of when you do better than the market, it's called alpha. So like you have to sort of beat the market. Alphanomics is about the economics of active investing. So that's the class I teach. I enjoy that because it brings together a lot of things I like to learn more about, including how people make decisions under uncertainty and also how to value a company. So it computes the present value of companies. And when you put the two together, you end up with investment strategies. And yeah, I love teaching. I just enjoy being on campus. So it's just fresh flow of ideas and an incredible number of people, lives that are always changing. So it's just like living by a stream. That's the other thing I love is fly fishing. So living by a stream because there's always this constant flow of people and ideas. It's never stagnant. It's a cool place to be. So.
That's a perfect analogy for campus, and I know a lot of us are missing that now that we're scattered around the world. But it's good to get little pieces of it back. And so, turning a little bit more to the current situation of things and then your own previous experience, right now, if you turn on the news, unemployment numbers are staggeringly high, and many seniors and many of my peers are graduating into an environment that they didn't plan for before. And there's many tragedies related to the COVID-19 pandemic that's going around. And some people that planned on certain jobs, those jobs maybe aren't there anymore. So as you mentioned before, there's uncertainty. But you've had a past in high pressure finance, like you mentioned, and you teach with the best and brightest all the time. And so is there anything that you've learned from your time in industry or even from teaching students that you think would be useful for seniors right now, given all this uncertainty?
All right. So, well, I think you guys are pretty fortunate because, I mean, many people have an illusion of control, but you have less of that. I think that.
So that's out the window.
What control? So yeah, I think one of the things we learn in human psychology is that we want to feel like we're in control all the time. And yeah, the reality is that there are so many levers in our lives that we can't control. And it's just a little more transparent right now. because it's so hard to make any sort of plans. So in a way, that's good. I mean, it's more of an opportunity, I think. And then when it comes to uncertainty, I think what's really valuable is to realize that life is never going to be certain, even though it might seem easier if you can make it more certain. It's always the decisions under uncertainty that actually elicit out of you who you really are. It's when you're not sure and you make a decision and you reflect on it, you start to discover that you're actually becoming who you are by making those decisions. And so in a way, I tell my students, life is about how you spend your risk budget. Because it's a total risk budget. And you want to get the maximum bang for your risk budget. And so I think that now is a good time to think about, what's the right way to spend your risk budget. So I think it's actually a great opportunity to sort of look at, yes, there's a lot of uncertainty, but on the other hand, what you most want to do is learn how to benefit from that uncertainty rather than necessarily sort of having no uncertainty in life. So I think it's a good time, actually. Yeah.
I mean, that's a very interesting perspective, given, you turn on the news and everything is like, how can we make this as negative as possible? And so,
Yeah.
what do you think? I mean, we have not had the fortune of taking your class, unfortunately. So what are some ways that you can maybe unpack that a little bit in terms of spending this risk budget that you keep talking about? Are there any concrete things you think that seniors can tap into now in terms of advice?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One thing I find really useful. So I don't know if you've been at, have you taken a course at Stanford called Designing Your Life?
I'm actually planning to teach it or take it next year with my
Oh,
co-term.
perfect. That's perfect. So that's a great course that grew out of two professors, one of whom is David Evans, who's a Christian. And it's about thinking about your life and how to live it well. It's a really wonderful book. I recommend that. And now it's become a book. It was a course for like decades in Stanford, the most popular course perhaps in undergrad. And now it's become a New York Times bestseller. It's called Designing Your Life. And I've been taking a group of students through it. So I'm a counselor at a fellowship on campus. And so we're near the end of the book now. We're in chapter 10, and it's called Failure Immunity. And one of the cool ideas it's trying to get to is that, the success and failure stuff there's two ways to look at your life. One is think of it as a finite game. So in a finite game, the outcome is everything, and you just try to win. But there's another way to look at life, which is that it's an infinite game. And in an infinite game, you're learning how to play better all the time. And that's it. The outcome, actually, in any given round is incidental. And, I think as a Christian, life is an infinite game. We're learning how to understand who we are, who God is, and actually learning what this game is really about. And it's not, which job I got or any particular outcome in this round. It's about how this game is structured and how I play. And I think that's a huge advantage because you don't see success and failure measured in terms of, which job I got or which, because it's really not about that. It's about who you're becoming in this wonderful infinite game that you're a part of. So I
Wow.
find that really helpful. Yeah, even
That's
the book it's not overtly Christian, but the questions that are being asked and the fact that life is an infinite game is very much speaks to me as a Christian. So
that's pretty profound. And I'm wondering, thinking back to when you were, 22, 23 years old, were you just, gifted with this infinite wisdom at that age? Or maybe more concretely, where were you when you were around our age? And did you have any idea that you would be spouting this wisdom now, or even being in the position you're at today?
no, I was trying to get a job. No, I became a Christian right after I graduated from undergrad. So like my faith journey and my career journey almost just are so also intertwined. And I went through and got a math degree but then I got accounting as my major because I noticed that math was, I kind of liked math. It was easy for me. And so, but I noticed mathematicians didn't always have a job, but accountants always had a job.
So you had that security with your accounting degree.
So I was a practical kind of guy. So I said, I'm going to get accounting. But when I graduated, and I had a big conversion experience. So in the summer afterwards, and I think that's shifted my perspective on life and purpose so dramatically that I actually went in to resign. I was in an accounting firm because I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't think it's going to be accounting. So,
Wow.
so yeah, at that time I was like completely clueless. The only thing I knew was there is this incredible loving God who went through the trouble of letting me know him. And I didn't know why and what he wanted, but I knew that I wanted to be sure I was available. So I thought the best thing to do is go resign first.
You're like, I don't know my next step, but I know it's not here. So let's go
Yeah, right.
back to where I
And I'll
was.
tell you,
Yeah.
but God, God never leaves you to by yourself through these things. So I went in, I got up my nerve to go and resign to my partner in an accounting firm. He's this big, tall Englishman. And I said, well, Peter, I don't know how to tell you this, but this summer something happened. And so now I'm thinking I'm not going to be here as long as I thought I was going to be. And I was in the National Research Department in an accounting firm. And he said, oh, Charles, what happened? I told him, well, I was in a Christian retreat camp, and I think I became a Christian. So I feel like I have to reevaluate my careers. And he said, well, let's have lunch. So we sit down, and he asked me some more questions. I told him, and then all of a sudden he says, Charles, I don't know how to tell you this, but 2 years ago, the exact same thing happened to me.
What?
I'm telling you, like, you're not left alone for a split second when you're kind of on this journey with God, right? So I'm like, huh? He said, yeah, I grew up in an Anglican household, and we always went to church, but I actually didn't believe anything. And then a few years ago, my wife became a Christian, and I thought she was crazy. And then I became a Christian, and he said, the first thing I wanted to do was to resign. I'm looking at this guy. I
And
thought, wow,
but
God
then
is
he
a sense of
didn't.
humor.
So
It took me,
yeah.
it took me weeks to psych myself up to tell this guy.
And he's like, oh yeah, same thing. I know
He
where
says,
you're
yeah,
at.
well, doesn't everybody go through this? I'm like, and then we had this wonderful conversation in which he said, when you're a new Christian, you may not know what God wants you to do, and maybe you don't just quit everything because maybe he wants you to learn something where you are. And until such time as you kind of get a feel for what you should do, maybe you should just sort of, he said, if you want to go to seminary, you can take night classes. There are night classes in Toronto. And if you start serving at church, you get a sense of what you might be good at. It was so wise, and it was coming from the most unexpected source. And I thought, oh, this is God talking. I'm taking notes.
So it sounds like you went from there, and then you took some courses at seminary. And
Yes.
so, can you share about that experience? Like, you're going from
Yeah.
you don't know what you want to do, you get this accounting background, and then you go into accounting, you say, this is not for me, and now you're doing these
Right.
night classes. So what happened next, and was that an important period in your life, and how has that informed you
Yeah,
today?
it was a really important period in my life. So I didn't resign. I kept working as an accountant during the day. I took night classes in a seminary, and I met my wife and my current wife. Now
Oh,
we've been married 37 years. So, and
congratulations.
so we started taking classes at night together in seminary. We we felt like we needed to tell people about God, but we didn't know how. But we were both Chinese, so we went to Chinatown in Toronto.
Mhm.
We sort of stood in the street corner and handed out pamphlets together. And then we discovered we probably kind of have a lot in common.
And you're like, wow, let's do this for the rest of our lives.
Exactly. We were like, because I said, I don't know why, if you have all this good news, it's all bottled up and nobody's standing around telling people. And so I wanted to do it. I went to do it. And then she said, I've always wanted to do this. The two of us stood there. And we knew that most people were going to take it and throw in the garbage. But then we thought, well, but we had some really good conversations with people. And more than that, we got to know each other. And then we decided, so we probably should keep doing this.
Let's just make this
So
permanent. Let's keep
yeah,
going.
exactly. So, I started off just wanting to serve God, and I didn't really know. And he just sort of put all the pieces and sort of gears started rotating. And I finished 3 years at at the accounting firm. And then I knew at that time I was teaching some youths in my church, and I discovered it was incredibly gratifying. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was doing very little for them, and they were so appreciative. And I thought, I want to teach. I don't know where I'm going to teach, but I think God wants me to be a teacher. And so then they said, well, you have an accounting degree and you did okay, so why don't you go get a PhD?
Why don't you just keep this thing going? Just get
Yeah,
another
right. So I'm
degree.
like,
Yeah.
okay, okay. So I went in and I really didn't know I would like research. It turned out I really enjoyed the research, but God knew that. All I knew was I wanted to go somewhere where I could teach. And so and then after 3 years of that accounting firm, I resigned and went to seminary full time.
Hmm.
I felt like, so my wife, by then she was my wife, she said, if you don't go now, you probably can't go later. And right now, um, if there's some things you want to sort out and you want to understand about God's word, and you should probably do it earlier rather than later. We didn't have kids. So I did that first, and then I applied for a PhD. Um, and I only applied to one school, which is kind of not probably the way to do it either.
It seems like it
Because somebody
worked.
told me Cornell is a good place, and I drove by and I talked to one professor there. I liked him, and I'm like, heck, I'm coming. He said, oh, he said, well, if you apply, we'll let you in. I'm like,
Oh,
we only
okay.
had a 15-minute conversation. So I said, did you hear that? I said to my wife. He said, let me in. And she said, yeah, I heard him say that.
Wow.
So I
That's
applied
how
and I
grad
was,
school really works.
yeah, it's so weird. Because I wasn't thinking, I go to some famous place or anything. I just want to teach, right? So, but then I graduated and I ended up getting a whole bunch of offers from everywhere. And then I started to realize there was a responsibility here about doing research also that I didn't know God wanted me to do. And I didn't realize I would really love. And so that's kind of how things went. So actually, I don't think you ever sit down at any moment and can plan out your life. All you can do is see it as a scroll that's rolling ahead of you, and God is unfolding it as you take each step forward. And so you just trust the fact that he's holding the scroll in his hand, and when it's time to know, you will know. And you're better off just trusting him than to try to find a scroll of your own. So it's really so many parts of my life have been unexpected. Like I got to Cornell, and they said, "Oh, there's this professor that asked for you. I know you're an accountant, but he's not an accounting professor. But he wanted to see if you could, because you're interested in human behavior." So I walk into. He said, "But if you don't think it's a good fit, then just ask for an accounting professor." So I walk into the office of a relatively young man. His name is Richard Thaler, and
Oh
he was
wow.
going to become a Nobel Prize winner in
Yeah.
behavioral economics.
That
like,
you knew him before he was famous. Yeah.
like I didn't even know who he was. I had no idea what behavioral economics is. I walk in, and God said, "Well, there's this guy you should probably meet," and he was almost the only guy doing it at the time.
Wow.
So. And so in the middle of nowhere, and then he eventually went to MIT in Chicago, and that's where he went. He's still a professor at the University of Chicago. Won the Nobel Prize in 2017. So
Good company to
he,
be around.
yeah, yeah. So and through him, I got to meet a number of other people who won Nobel Prizes. And I've gotten and got to write papers with them, and it's been a really exciting experience. But it was not one that I would have been able to plan at all. The only
Mhm.
thing I knew was I needed to stay close to a God who loves me and loves others so much that he was willing to give his life for us.
Wow.
Uh,
So that's really great. Oftentimes, many of my peers and other seniors across the country, we always think 10, 20, 30 years out, like, what can I do right now to let the dominoes fall? But hearing this, it's just more sobering that it's impossible to know what's going to come all those years
exactly.
out. And so as we're sitting here, almost being forced to stay put, do you have any advice for what people should be doing in this time, or we're just not able to run around and let our ideas make the most of us?
Yeah, so I think it's a good time. What I found initially, I was very irritated by the restrictions.
Hmm.
There were things I was used to that I really wanted to do, but then over a little bit more time, I found I have a new routine where I actually can spend more quiet time with God, and I can do more journaling, which when I get busy, I tend to just scribble a little bit, but I have a little more time to reflect. I think when it's dry, the plants, they stick their roots further down in the soil,
Mm.
right? So this is a dry time. I mean, we can't do the things we're used to, the socialing and all, the sports. I miss the sports, and I miss a lot of
Oh, same
things.
here.
I
Other
miss
than
the
The
light
Last Dance,
machine.
there's not been much.
Yeah, but being still is a wonderful discipline to learn, but very hard these days. This is a great opportunity to do that. Just having more times to reflect and to really get a sense of what you believe and why, and also because I mean, what you believe and who you are and what you do. Those three things: who you are, what you do, and what you believe. This is in the Designing Your Life book. It's just, if those three things are in harmony, if they are coherent in your life, who you are, what you, which requires you to reflect, right? Otherwise, you
Hmm.
wouldn't know who you are. You wouldn't know what you believe. And then if you end up doing that which is consistent with what you believe and who you are, then you have a well-designed life. Basically, it's a life that's cogent and coherent, and it's a life with a lot of meaning because you know why what you do, right? Because you have a worldview and you're charting according to that. So I think that's really a good time to do that. Get the book, go through with a few people. I mean, it's
We
worth
can put the
doing.
link below to go get the book.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
even get royalty or commission. I mean,
yeah, free
but it's
knowledge right here.
yeah, yeah. But
No,
it's a really
that's
good book.
really good. That's, I mean, just aligning those three things, and this is the perfect time where we don't have as many distractions, so we are forced to, if we're wise, to sit down and try and align and figure out what we believe. So I really appreciate that piece of advice, and I hope other people do as well. But on that same like train of thought, when you're talking about a well-designed life, it's almost analogous to success in life, or how some other people would
Mm,
define success. And so, is that how you personally define success in your life, or
mm,
how you
mm,
advise we should define success? I
mm,
mean,
mm,
some people
mm,
maybe are always saying, well, if I get an A or if I get this job, that's pretty successful.
mm.
But now that many of these things are uncertain, just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. So everybody says they want to be successful. Like, if you ask anybody, do you want to be successful? Everybody raises their hand. They want to be successful. But success is not necessarily a great thing because you could be a successful thief,
Mm,
successful liar,
yeah.
successful terrorist. These are all success in some sense, right? So success is in itself not really anything. It's success by definition is just attaining a goal,
Mm.
right? So, you're successful, you attain. The more important question is whether your goal is worthwhile,
Oh, wow.
right? So this is really important because we normally think, oh, well, I want to be successful. You already have a goal in mind. Like, what does success look like? It means I'm going to be financially independent at 25 or something,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. We have a goal already. But if you are, for me, I'm a Christian, right? So I believe there is a creator. And so like, if I want to know what success is, I need to kind of turn back to my creator and say, why was I made? It's
Hmm.
like this, the designer has the best idea of what it means because he knows why you're
Yeah, he
designed. So,
designed. So you're
yeah,
like,
right.
so
So,
why
I
am I
mean,
here again? Yeah.
yeah. So, like, the success of a knife is to cut because it was designed to cut, right? The success of a racehorse is to run because it was bred to run, right? So, what is success as a human being really has to do with what you think this human journey is all about, right? And then if you're a Christian, you turn back and you look at the Bible, the word success never shows up. It's
Mm.
it's, it's all about faithfulness. It's not about, so
Yeah.
it's the faithful. What does that mean? It means that when you're given a charge, you kind of make that your agenda, and so um, along the way, you're going to be doing a lot of things, but the agenda is really kind of from above. I mean, the person who created you to be a part of something bigger, right? In the way I feel I've been very fortunate is there's a couple of things that are sort of my compass, if you will. And one of them is just sort of gospel-centered agenda. So for me, it's not just, God didn't reveal himself to me so that I can feel good, that I get comforted, or God revealed himself because he's on a mission and I'm just part of that. So this gospel-centered agenda, even though, I'm managed a lot of money, or I've been a professor and I got tenure, and those are just where you carry it out. But really the agenda doesn't change, which is that God is in pursuit of people who don't know who he is. And that is the overriding sort of, it's the center of gravity in terms of my deciding where I go and what to do. And so if you only looked at my resume, you may not sort of see the parallel spiritual journey that I've been on. Like, why did I decide to go to Michigan when I had offers from every school, many schools that are ranked high? Why did I decide to go from Michigan back to Cornell when I had a bunch of offers? For me, I saw a church in Ithaca that needed a lot of support, and I felt like there were not many people who can live in that small town. It was a church that was outreaching to graduate students from China. We knew we were supposed to go. It was just very
You're
hard
like,
for
this
us
is
to go.
very obvious to go here.
Yeah, right. But it took me a year anyway to kind of, go.
Yes. Sometimes we know what we need to do, but it's hard pill to
Yeah,
swallow.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was really, I was like, oh, it's not fair. They just want me to be associate professor there. But somebody gave me a chair professor offer in a bigger school. Like,
Oh
why am I
man.
going back there? Blah, 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 blah. It took me like months. But then I was convicted. I was supposed to go there and lead a weekend retreat, and I was preparing for it. And I felt like God saying to me, oh, you're willing to go and talk to them, but you're not willing to go live among them.
And then you're like, all right, let's sign this offer.
So that next morning, I called and resigned from Michigan and accepted the job offer from Cornell, and then I went to speak to them.
Wow. That's an incredible story.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there are a lot of these things, that are pivotal in your life, but at the time you were just trying to figure out, that you really, there's a center of gravity, which is God's mission. And I'm looking to try to fit somehow into it. And I get pulled away by lots of other distractions, but overall, I just keep coming back to the center of gravity, which is, God has a heart for the deepest needs of the human soul. And that need is not met anywhere else. I mean, it's just not met. I mean, if you've experienced it, then you'll know that something else won't fill it. And since how could you wander around as if you didn't know?
Yeah. You can't ignore it once you know.
Yeah, once you
Yeah.
know, it's like, it's true. I understand that other people don't get to, they don't get to know it just because I got to know it. I have to learn to speak a language of love so that God can change their hearts, right? So, but I can't make that happen. I remember I became a Christian and I just started to talk to my friends. I just grabbed them and talk, talk, talk. And one of them looked at me for a long time and says, Charles, this is not like Monopoly where you show me the rules and I know how to play.
You're like, I don't know what to do next. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh God, you're right. Okay, I'm gonna put her in your hands because I really don't know what to do next.
Yeah. This is incredible. And I want to respect your time. I know we're nearing the end here. And so as a final tagline, if you could leave one thing for any seniors or graduating students right now, what would be your one piece of advice?
I guess I would say, I'll share one verse, which I like a lot from 2 Corinthians, verse 4. By the way, 2 Corinthians 4 and 5, you should go read it just for fun. It's just so amazing. It's one thing. So 2 Corinthians 4, verse 5 says, for what we preach is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as servants for Jesus' sake. So that it's in the context of this gospel-centered agenda. Basically, two things, just that Jesus is Lord, and the other thing is that life is about service. You know, if you kind of get those two things really clear, it doesn't matter where you go. You're gonna have a really meaningful life,
Wow.
and you're going to actually benefit others, and you're going to get satisfaction out of that because you realize, number one, that it's what we preach is not about ourselves, it's not ourselves. It's Jesus is Lord. That's my message. And then we are servants for Jesus' sake. The life of service, of servanthood, is the meaningful life. It's the life that makes you truly happy. You're not going to find happiness, but you'll find happiness when you realize that you find happiness in serving.